Welcome to Shamrock Sports, live on the second floor of the Duncan Student Center with Austin Rooney and Paul Farrington making his Shamrock Sports debut. Horlander, who has been running around like a renegade on campus, we're still not sure where he is. You've been looking for him for about 3 weeks, and so far no luck.
No, he's hard to locate right now. You know, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere.
Yeah, so we've had to replace Horlanders with some people, and so we're lucky enough to have Paul Farrington with us. Paul has been around. Paul, when did you start showing up? December?
About a month ago.
So Paul's been showing up to meetings, and we haven't found a way to get him on air, but he still shows up every week, like the good man he is. And so we decided, why the heck not? Let's throw him on air. And we've got a lot to discuss. We've got a couple of big games this weekend for both the men's and women's basketball teams, and it's another tough matchup for the Notre Dame men's basketball team because they'll have to go on the road and take on Virginia, who's a top 5 team, but they're coming off a win. Third ACC win against Georgia Tech on Sunday, 69-59, and they're on 6 days rest. So, I mean, never say never, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there's not a better time to play Virginia than this week because, again, Notre Dame coming into this contest, you mentioned it, off of a six-day rest. They're coming in. This is a really tough Virginia team. Don't get me wrong. Notre Dame got destroyed by Virginia back at home at Purcell Pavilion. But if you're going to play a road matchup against a top 5 team in the country, you want that rest. It gives you extra time to prep, extra time for practices. And I think Mike Bray's going to have his troops ready.
Honestly, Austin, you could give these guys as much rest as you want, but playing Virginia, I don't think it's going to matter much. They're going to be on you the whole game. It's going to be a tough matchup.
There's no doubt it's a tough matchup. You look at UVA, and this team is stacked with talent from Kyle Guy to DeAndre Hunter to Ty Jerome, but that doesn't mean that Notre Dame doesn't have their own talent. You look at guys like T.J. Gibbs starting to heat up possibly. He put up 20 points in his last time out. So I think it's possible that you get some guys to catch fire, and all of a sudden this team is ready to go.
The Irish avenged the earlier loss against Georgia Tech in Atlanta earlier in the season on Sunday. Pick up their third ACC win. Notre Dame finally beat a team that isn't Boston College in the ACC. We know it's been a tough year, injuries, young team. We've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, but hey, they put together a nice win against Georgia Tech, but it doesn't get much easier as the season finishes out. Maybe a couple more wins, and you in your NCAA tournament fantasy land, why don't you just go ahead and explain to the folks your sort of the numbers, you've crunched them, so just go ahead and lay out what you think the path is for a possible bid to the tournament for the Fighting Irish.
So this is a long shot. That might be an understatement, actually. This is a real long shot. I'm saying less than 1% chance, but still, this is the path. An 8-10 ACC school gets into the NCAA tournament. So what does that mean? Notre Dame's currently 3-8. They had to finish the season 5-2. That would mean they're not going to win versus UVA, but they pick up wins versus Wake Forest at home, versus Virginia Tech at home. At Florida State, they win 1 of 2 at Florida State and at Louisville, and finish the season with wins over Clemson and Pitt. So that means you win all of your unranked games. There are 3 of those, and then you win 2 ranked games out of 4. So that would be a 5-2 finish to the season.
And who out of those games there, who do you think are the most likely that we could win?
Again, I would say at home versus Virginia Tech is a very possible win. Virginia Tech currently ranked 22nd in the country. And then Florida State and Louisville, I don't see Notre Dame being able to beat a team like Louisville, but I wouldn't put it out of the question to take home a win versus Florida State.
I don't know, Austin. I know that you said it's less than 1% chance, but you're asking a lot of a team. Again, remember, like Johnny just said, Boston College is 2 of our 3 ACC wins. We're 13-11 overall. We haven't won consecutive games, and I don't know how long it's been. It's asking a lot for a really young team.
Since the pre-conference season.
Yeah. We have Purdue. That's a nice win.
I think it starts and ends there in terms of good wins, though, for Notre Dame. You talk about Purdue. They played tough teams. When it comes time to show up against teams like Duke and UVA, they haven't been up to the task. Does this team, the way it's currently played, does it belong on the NCAA tournament? No, they're not even close. But if they could go on a run, if they knock off these top 25 teams, all of a sudden, this is a team that, maybe if you go on a run in the tournament, in the ACC tournament that is, even if they don't get those 5 wins, you never know.
Tell the folks about the insider knowledge you have from last Sunday.
Regarding which one is this?
What we talked about, you told us that you were with Coach Bray. You guys had a little,
yes,
heart-to-heart or something out there. So tell us
you were the only
what
fan
happened
there, right?
I mean,
you were the only fan at the game.
There were about 12 of us in front of the who were courtside. I don't know what happened to the rest of the student section. They didn't show up versus Georgia Tech.
could have been the 2-8 ACC record.
Yeah,
It
maybe.
could have been that rough record. But what I will say, I talked to Coach Bray. He invited 4 of us on to the court to do the alma mater with the students. And I
As
said,
he does after every game,
That's right.
I should add.
And it is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I said, how about a run into the late season here in the ACC? And he goes, why not? I said, how about the tournament? He responded again, why not us? So, hey, you never know. Notre Dame, they'd probably make a movie about them if they somehow found a way to get in the NCAA tournament. But look, it's
Just getting in, they'd make a movie.
You know who
Just
else?
getting in.
You know who else adopted the "Why not us" mantra was the 04 Red Sox in the ALCS. Down 0-3 against the Yankees, they came back and they won.
Equivalent talent levels
Well,
of those
I
teams.
mean, hey, I'm just trying to draw the connection here. You can draw any conclusions that you want, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. Now, Virginia, who is 21-2 on the year, 9-2 in league play. Their 2 league losses are to the first-place team in the league, Duke. As you mentioned, have just a plethora of talent. And when they came to South Bend a few weeks ago, it was from start to finish total domination. They started out on a 12-0 run. They won 82-55. They had
could have won
4
by more than
players
that,
in
though,
double figures. I mean, it was from top to bottom a complete dismantling, and that was the game that Coach Bray said after. They took the heart away from the team. The team did not play with the fighting spirit, even though it's been a tough year and they've lost a lot of games. That game, he felt, they didn't even play with some heart. So maybe they use that example and they turn things around at John Paul Jones Arena on Saturday.
Well, here's the thing, Johnny. That game, you have to remember, Notre Dame started off scoreless the first 6 minutes of the game. Did not score.
Yeah.
The next game, right after that was Duke, 2 points in the first 6 minutes. So I don't know where that heart went because it definitely didn't come back the following night or 2 nights later. I cannot see things going better in Virginia than they were going in Notre Dame.
I don't know if it could go worse.
It
That's
might be
good.
able to,
That's a
be
great
a little
point.
worse.
I think, Notre Dame, if they get off to a better start, maybe they're in it in the first 5 to 10 minutes and they get to halftime and it's a relatively close game. Crazier things have happened, but you have to start the game well because we saw what happened last time when Notre Dame was at home. You mentioned no points in the first 6 minutes, and after that, the game was over 6 minutes in. Notre Dame was down 12-0. And the thing about playing these top 5 teams, it's almost impossible to come back against a team like Virginia when you are significantly less talented than a team like that. So what has to happen, you have to get off to a hot start, and you have to find a way to stay in that game, and maybe late in the game you find a way to pull it off. But that's really the best case scenario for Notre Dame right now.
UVA, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying everything has to go right to beat a team like UVA. You have to get off to the hot start. You need guys like Gibbs, because Gibbs coming into the season, TJ Gibbs is supposed to be one of the better players on this team, and he still is, but he hasn't put up the numbers to me to support that.
Now, I think it's an interesting point you make about TJ Gibbs, and he started to maybe turn things around, but again, it's a big maybe. So he put up 20 points versus Georgia Tech. He had just 2 versus Miami in that loss. That was one of the big reasons Notre Dame lost that game. He had 19 the game before at BC and 12 the game before versus Duke. So maybe he's starting to find this consistency, but until we see it again versus Virginia and then possibly in the following game versus Wake, I think we need more evidence to be sure that TJ Gibbs is really ready to turn this thing around.
Played a lot of minutes last year, TJ Gibbs did, as a sophomore because of the injuries to Matt Farrell and Bonzie Colson. So a lot of people expected he was going to take all those minutes and come in and really be able to be a floor general for the Fighting Irish this season. Maybe hasn't turned out as people had hoped, but there are multiple components to that. I mean, it's not just, you can't place it all on him. The team has had multiple injuries with Rex Pfluger and Robbie Carmody, and they're a young team, so it hasn't really quite gelled together as people have hoped. UVA coming off one of their tougher weekends of the season. They had to, last weekend on Saturday, they hosted Duke, and then they had to turn around and travel to North Carolina. They pick up the win against North Carolina after losing to Duke by 10. Actually, the game at Cameron Indoor when UVA played Duke was a lot closer.
Yes.
It was a 2-point game. Now there's a basket at the end that made it look a little closer, but obviously this team is extremely good. They're 11-1 at home. Let's talk for a moment, though, while we're on UVA. about their head coach, Tony Bennett. Now, there are some rumors circling that Tony Bennett might be a top target for the UCLA job that just opened up in December after they fired Steve Alford. And I've seen a lot of articles that have said, why would Tony Bennett leave Virginia for UCLA? Why would he do that?
He wouldn't.
You really think so?
No, I don't think he would go anywhere. I think he has established such an amazing program at UVA, and I think Tony Bennett, maybe behind Coach K, or maybe he might not even be behind Coach K right now in terms of his development of talent. He doesn't have the talent Coach K has. He doesn't have a Zion Williamson playing for him over at Virginia, but he still gets outstanding seasons year in and year out. I think he may be the best coach in college basketball right now because he's able to develop talent, and he has so many good years consecutively at Virginia. Why would he leave? He has the talent there. He can win national championships at Virginia. Why go to UCLA if he doesn't have to?
Here's the reason. Think of big history. UCLA, Virginia. I know Virginia has had great basketball programs, but you go back to John Wooden. You have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar playing there. You have Bill Walton. The history of UCLA, the aura of that program, it's more impressive than the Virginia program. And I agree. There's no reason to leave now because he is the face of Virginia basketball, like Krzyzewski's the face of Duke basketball. But just saying, if you take him out of Virginia and put him in UCLA and you could get them winning again, because they haven't won a championship in a long time now. They haven't really had many good teams over the past 20 years. But if you could get him there to establish a dominant program, it'd be a great story for him.
No, I agree with you. I don't think he would leave Virginia, but I don't think he wouldn't give it at least some thought. And as you mentioned, the name, the brand of UCLA in college basketball.
But what is that brand today?
Will have cachet in perpetuity.
I mean, 20 years ago, yes, but right now.
No.
That's what I'm saying. There's no reason to leave now, but just the aura of the UCLA program is a little
Historically, yes.
It's enticing.
Historically, yes. Right now, no.
No, that's why if he
they're
goes
an irrelevant
there,
program right now in college basketball.
That's why if he goes
That's
there
not
and
true.
makes it relevant, if he makes it relevant again, or at least like highly competitive again,
The
it'll be
UCLA
impressive.
program will always be a relevant program, just like, say, the Notre Dame football program will always be a relevant football program. Even in 09, during the dog days of Charlie Weiss, they were still relevant.
But but you're trying to tell me a top 5 coach back in the mid-2000s would have wanted to come to Notre Dame? I don't think a top 5 head coach would have any interest.
Well, I mean, I can't go back in time and determine that. All I'm saying is, if you are a Division I head coach, you have to at least, unless you're at Duke, Kentucky, Carolina, the Blue Bloods, you would have
Is
to.
UVA not included in that
no,
category?
They are not, and
I disagree.
UCLA is.
I
is not a
totally
blue blood.
no.
Do you think
Tony
UCLA,
Bennett has turned them into a power, but they are not a blue blood.
Do you think UCLA could get better recruits than Virginia if Tony Bennett were there?
Right, you're trying to tell me.
I'm telling you, Tony Bennett at Virginia, Tony Bennett at UCLA. Who gets better recruits?
You're on the East Coast. I think as an ACC team, ACC is the powerhouse of college basketball right now. No one's close. I think UVA is getting those recruits.
You're right to point out that the Pac-12 has not been very good in basketball this year. But I would agree with Paul that if Bennett goes to the Bruins, he would get better players than he could at UVA.
I'm not sold.
Well, it's interesting food for thought because that's a ginormous position in the college basketball world, the head coach at UCLA. And so we'll see how that vacancy fills and what takes place after that. Duke right now on top of the ACC 10-1, and Virginia's right behind him at 9-2, and Carolina as well. So a lot of movement there at the top of the ACC. How about Virginia Tech? Quietly put together a solid conference season. They're at the 4th spot at 8-4. Them and Louisville and Syracuse. Who would have thought that those 3 teams at the beginning of the season would kind of be right there? I mean, there is some clear separation between the top and those teams, but I don't think many people expected Virginia Tech to put up the kind of wins and ability that they have in the ACC this year.
I would like to go back to the one comment you made. There's a lot of separation there. I think there's a ton of separation there. You talk about Duke, you talk about UVA, you talk about UNC. Those are 3 top 10 teams. And below that, you find teams like Virginia Tech and FSU and Louisville, the other 3 ranked teams in the ACC. They're definitely a step below those teams, or a couple of steps below. I don't really see them as competitive at all. So yeah, it's definitely impressive that Virginia Tech has found themselves in the top 5 in the ACC, or currently ranked 4th, as you mentioned. But I don't see them as an ACC powerhouse right now, and they're ranked 22nd in the country. They're a team that a lot of lower-level teams in the ACC have an opportunity to pick off and win as an upset.
Yeah, there are very clearly tiers in the ACC. Yep. And I think that second tier with teams like Virginia, Louisville, Florida State, those are teams that probably can't win a national championship, but they can maybe make a run if they get hot. That's how I view those tier, that second tier.
Notre Dame women's basketball team, we talked last week about the struggles that they've had recently that were a little bit surprising. But after their loss against Miami, 72-65, a week and a half ago, they put together a win against Florida State, 97-70. Big win against Florida State, I might add. And then a win this week against Boston College, 97-47. Double-doubles from Jackie Young and Jessica Shepard. Got out to a 17-4 lead. So it looks like maybe they've turned a corner after the couple of losses that they had against UNC and Miami. And they've got a relatively easy path in front of them the next 3 games. They play Monday at NC State, might be closer than the experts think, and then at home against Duke and then at Syracuse. So you think the team is sort of, those losses have rattled their cage a bit and they're starting to turn into a different team?
Well, you'd have to hope. I still believe this team is the most talented team in women's college basketball. They have the 2 tough contests left on their schedule at NC State and at Syracuse. It's a top 12 team in NC State, number 16 overall in Syracuse. So again, 2 good teams on that schedule. But I think this team is too talented to lose again. I think that you mentioned rattled their cages. I don't see that a team that's that good is going to go into some of these places like NC State and Syracuse and find a way to lose those games, because that's how they lost versus UNC in Miami. They legitimately found ways to lose. Turner had 5 points in the loss at Miami, and then more importantly than that even, they had 2 points off the bench. So that has to be concerning looking forward, because the only player who's coming back is Jackie Young next season. So the question is, who's going to pick up the slack in the future? They're going to need bench points. But as for the rest of this season, I think they'll be fine. I think that they win the rest of their regular season. They'll probably make it to the ACC championship game and have an opportunity in the tournament. So we'll see how that goes. But I think as for the rest of the regular season, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll be fine the rest of the regular season. Come tournament time, it'll be interesting because there's so much talent in women's college basketball this season. And really anyone could win for the first time in, I don't know, like 5 years it seems, at least heading into the tournament. But yeah, the Irish, they're 3-2 over their past 5 games. Some unexpected losses, as Johnny was saying, to UNC, and then following that up with the loss to, who was that, Miami, yeah. Right? Because right after the men's team. But yeah, I think the main problem is, and you mentioned this backstage, is the scoring. Arike Gumbawale had 13 points against Miami and UNC, and for Notre Dame's women's team to really be good, they need her, I think. As much talent as there is, I think she's the star of the team, and to carry them in the tournament, I think she's going to have to do it.
Yeah.
Well, she showed herself as a star a season ago with those 2 shots in the Final Four, and I think that you're right as far as she's the star. I don't think that she has to put up 20 points every game if they want to win against some of these okay ACC opponents. If she puts up 15 versus NC State and 15 versus Syracuse, as long as the rest of the starters step up and you get double digits out of the other 4 players who are first-team players or star players and first-round picks in next year's WNBA draft, I see them all as, if they can all put up double digits, they'll be just fine.
She had 23 against Boston College. Again, 97-47 win. ACC right now, women's basketball looks like this. Louisville at the top of the conference, 10-1. Their only loss in South Bend to Notre Dame. But the Irish, as we mentioned, dropped the 2 against North Carolina and Miami. They're at 10-2. NC State at 9-2. Notre Dame's next opponent on Monday on the road. Miami 9-2. Florida State 8-4. So, the ACC right now doesn't look like it's completely set. It looks relatively open, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it ends there. We haven't talked about football in 2 or 3 weeks, to the joy of Austin Rooney. There was National Signing Day the first week of February, so we thought we'd give it a mention. The Irish signed 24 players, 3 defensive ends in this cycle, including 4-star defensive end Isaiah Foskey, 6'5", 240 guy out of De La Salle, which is a powerhouse on the West Coast. It looks like the final rankings have Notre Dame's class in like the 9 to 12 range, depending on where you get your recruiting rankings. But under Brian Kelly, that's pretty much where they've averaged in their 9 years. And then for next year's recruiting cycle, the coaches have indicated that speed is going to be their top priority. A lot of defensive guys in this class. Next year's class, they're looking for speed. And if you watched the Cotton Bowl, Notre Dame needs some speed. But what do you think about this year's class?
Well, they had some good players. You mentioned a couple of them. Kyle Hamilton is their #1 overall recruit. He's a safety. You know that Notre Dame's losing some defensive players next year. You see Julian Love as one of those guys who has been one of their staples as a defensive back. And it's good to have other guys like safeties such as Kyle Hamilton, who's likely to step in next season and probably play a pretty big role for this Notre Dame football team.
Yeah, and I actually thought when you were talking about speed, like that has to be the priority, at least heading into the future, because if we're going to compete with Clemson, Alabama, and all these other dominant programs, we got to get a little faster. We had a lot of talent this year. We certainly had enough talent to win the Cotton Bowl game, but the problem with this team was speed. And we couldn't match up athletically, I thought, with a lot of these.
You got to have some
programs.
guys who can outrun the safeties.
Yeah, and you don't need a lot. You don't need a lot of them. You just need like one or two guys.
Yeah.
And Dexter Williams
Like
was
star.
sort of that guy.
Yeah.
But we had no one who could just make a little screen pass and break away.
I think it was a lot of good players collectively this season, not really one great player.
Going back to the Clemson game, though, that defensive line for Clemson.
Do we really have to go back to the Clemson game?
You mentioned it. I mean, yeah, if you're going to talk about the reasons that Dexter Williams didn't break out, part of it is the defensive line for Clemson was so good that the offensive line couldn't really do much to give Dexter Williams an opening to break out for a big game.
Yeah, that's true, and there were many other problems too. Another item of note in football this week, Lance Taylor brought in as the running backs coach. Now, this was reported a few months ago, or not a few months ago, but about a month ago. And they finally made it official this week. He started work this week. They posted a whole video of him driving his truck into work, kind of like bringing the lunch pail in, hard day at work. He was the running backs coach at Stanford from 2014 to 2016. Two names you might recognize, Christian McCaffrey, Bryce Love. He put together and engineered that rushing attack that was 3 of the top 5 rushing seasons in Stanford history. So he's got a pretty good track record of coaching running backs, and hopefully maybe this could help with recruiting one of those elite level players who can bring a lot of speed to the offense.
Yeah, and actually, he also spent a little time with the Carolina Panthers in the NFL.
That was his most recent.
Yeah, so him coming over here, he's coming from the NFL all the way into college football. Yeah. But he has a very difficult job this season, especially if you take a look at our running back unit. We have Tony Jones Jr., who's a good running back, but he's not like Dexter Williams. He's not going to explode and have a big run really when you need it. Then you have Avery Davis, who, Carroll Hall, I support him. But then you have guys like Jafar Armstrong, converted wide receiver. All of these guys, a lot of them are converted position players. And now you bring in Kyron Williams this year, a guy who might not be great off the bat. He played receiver, and for his first 2 years of high school, he was a slot receiver. But he's someone who, once he was converted to running back, really dominated his high school. And if you bring him in and have him at that, maybe have him play a little bit like Dexter Williams, where he could break away every now and then, he could catch the ball. Give him a few years, I'm telling you, Kyron Williams is going to be a player you'll know.
You mentioned Kyron Williams. I honestly think that #1 running back spot is open. I don't think that Jafar Armstrong or Tony Jones Jr. or clearly Avery Davis did enough to put themselves in position to be the #1 running back this season. Dexter Williams took that spot and ran away with it. And Jafar Armstrong got some rushes earlier in the season, especially when Dexter Williams was out for the first 4 games. But after that, it was Dexter Williams, and it was his job. And Jafar Armstrong and Tony Jones Jr. did not make a big impression once Dexter Williams was back. So I would not be surprised if someone like Kyron Williams, who's one of those top recruits Notre Dame has this season, has an opportunity to snag that job.
Lance Taylor takes over for Autry Denson, who became the head coach at Charleston Southern University, announced this was after the Cotton Bowl. So we'll see how that works. Another small news item in football, maybe not small. Wide receiver Javon McKinley was arrested last week, found unresponsive in an Uber shortly before 4 a.m. 2 campus police officers attempted to help him get back to his dorm, and he was sort of stumbling a little bit and allegedly punched the 2 officers in a, quote, rude, insolent, or angry manner. This was according to an affidavit. He faces a Class C misdemeanor, was released on a $250 bond. Last fall, appeared in 4 games and didn't play in the Cotton Bowl, but he saw action in the final 2 regular season games. And so the process will play out. The internal review, the university's review, is not public knowledge. And so the university will keep that under wraps for now, but we should expect to see some sort of disciplinary decision handed down at some point probably later this year. All right, let's move on to the ACC men's games that are happening this weekend. And we'll just start from the top here. Florida State at Georgia Tech. That's a 2 p.m. game in Atlanta. Two of the bottom teams in the ACC. Where do you see this one going, Paul?
Florida State, Georgia Tech. I have Florida State. They're a ranked team, I believe. It's 17th in the country right now. Just too much talent for Georgia Tech. We saw Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech. Anyone can beat Georgia Tech.
Yeah, you're right. That's my fault. Florida State actually better than people think. 19-5 overall and 7-4 in conference play.
I'm going to go with the upset here. This is one of the few upsets I'm going to pick. I'm going to go with Georgia Tech. Bounce back game after the big loss versus Notre Dame, and I think that they find a way to beat Florida State. Georgia Tech is home in this matchup, so one of the few reasons you can pick an upset this weekend.
The Fighting Josh Pastors get a win in Austin Rooney's eyes. All right, next game on the schedule, NC State, infamous for scoring only 24 points in a game just a few weeks ago, has to travel to Cameron Indoor. Do they eclipse the 24 points?
Yes. To that question, yes. Do they win? No, not close.
Yeah.
No, Duke will win by a lot.
Okay. Clemson, a team 5-6 in the ACC, but 15-9 overall, against Louisville. Louisville, under first-year head coach Chris Mack, 8-4 in conference, 17-8 overall. He had a great tenure at Xavier, and I thought that was one of the better hires in the offseason for any college basketball program. Of course, there were a number of good hires, but Louisville so far has put together a pretty nice season. They're at home against Clemson.
And following that Duke game, you know Louisville's going to come out with a lot of emotion. They're going to be laser focused. But I'm actually going to pick Clemson this game.
Really?
I'm going to pick Clemson because heading into the season, if you remember, this Tiger team was ranked and they were expected to do some things. I know they've been a little disappointing, but I think that hangover from the Duke game is still going to be in the back of Louisville's minds. And I know sometimes that can spur a team, but this time I actually think that it's going to hurt them. And I see their season taking a little bit of a dip.
I'm going to go with
23-point lead, by the way, that they couldn't hold on to on, Tuesday night against Duke?
I'm going to use your initial point, Paul, that you mentioned that they're coming off a bad loss, looking for to get back on the right track, and I think that happens this weekend. I think that Virginia Tech, or I beg your pardon, Louisville with a big win over Clemson.
Wake Forest with a 2-9 record, and they are hosting the North Carolina Tar Heels, the third team in the ACC.
No, UNC.
Okay, that was quick. Virginia Tech going on the road to the Pete. Pitt can make that place a little bit rowdy. Do they make it rowdy enough to pick up the win?
No. I still think that Virginia Tech pulls off this win. Virginia Tech is a pretty talented team, and they're coming into Notre Dame a little bit later. Yep. That's a win, the Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech game, that could help them moving down the stretch.
And I'm also going to pick Virginia Tech, but the Oakland Zoo, the Pitt student section, they can get loud, as Johnny said. I think it'll be a close game. Pitt last year had no ACC wins. This year, a little bit better. You really cannot get any worse.
Two.
Yeah, you really cannot get any worse.
You are correct.
It'll be a close game. It will be a close game, but Virginia Tech will win.
All right. And then on Sunday, Miami at Boston College. So two of the bottom teams in the ACC going at each other in Chestnut Hill. Who gets the win?
Oh, well, I've been thinking about this game all week. This is what I am excited for. Kai Bowman will lead Boston College to a miracle win over Miami.
A miracle win?
A miracle win.
Why do you categorize it as a miracle?
Well, it's Boston College. Any win's a miracle.
Paul Farrington.
I'm going
fireworks happen on his debut
Can I
show.
make my pick?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. Miami's winning this one. They're actually playing pretty well right now. They beat Notre Dame. They lost by just 3 points versus UNC, and they beat Clemson. This is a team that's actually playing pretty well in Miami right now.
Okay, final pick of the weekend is Monday, Big Monday, 7 p.m. in Blacksburg. UVA, after traveling to South Bend on Saturday, we'll see what happens there, taking on Virginia Tech. This could be a tough transition for the Cavaliers, tough road trip. Who do you got?
I have UVA. These two teams met earlier in the season, I believe, and UVA won by quite a bit. So I'm going to stick with that. Remember who they just beat also is UNC on the road. I don't think Blacksburg, I know it can get loud, but I don't think Blacksburg has the same environment as it has over in North Carolina. So I'm going to I'm going to stick with Virginia.
Do you read too much into the whole travel thing?
Yeah,
Sunday play or Saturday
I
playing
don't
and then
see
having to go?
No, I don't think it's that important.
Okay.
To be quite honest, I'm going to stick with UVA.
That's a
good
fair position to hold. Paul, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
What'd you think? Great first show. Quick little 5-10 second comment.
It's fun, paired with you two guys. I can't wait. If we ever find Horlander, I would love to do one with him eventually.
He might be back next week, allegedly. We're not sure. So stay tuned for that. We'll all just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching Shamrock Sports for this Friday, February 15th. Enjoy basketball.